My name is Bailey Evans. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and why I teach this workshop. I am a licensed professional counselor for Centra. I work full-time over at Bridges Treatment Center, and I specialize in trauma and working with families and overcoming experiences of traumatic events. I also am a mother of two little boys, 8 and 3, and I'm a single parent. And I also teach this stress management workshop, and I also help do lectures for local colleges and workshops for schools. So I'm a little overqualified to teach about stress management because I have a lot going on in my own life. But this is one of the workshops that I do, is one of my favorites. I'm very conversational. I tell a lot of stories. I want to give you good tools that you can take with you today. You can email me through Centra if you ever have questions or would like additional resources, and I can help connect you with those as well. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about what is stress. So what is stress anyway? So the Webster's Dictionary defines stress as a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. But what we have to consider is that stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. Does anybody watch TED Talks? Have you ever seen any of those? Okay, I love TED Talks. They're a symposium of really good ideas. They're free. You can watch them on YouTube. Kelly McGonigal has one. She's a social psychologist out of California, and she talks about how she's been helping people manage stress her entire career and how damaged she's made everyone. She hasn't really. She's probably been very helpful. But what research is showing now is not only can stress be damaging, but it can be helpful to us. It's our perception of the stress that is the problem. It isn't just necessarily the stressful event. So if we can start to think about stress when our heart starts to beat faster, our breathing becomes more shallow and rapid, our senses are becoming more focused, if we can see ourselves instead of decompensating as we are warriors preparing for battle, my body's meant to do this so I can overcome this task, it makes us more likely to be successful to handle those tasks. So if you've never watched her TED Talk on managing stress and anxiety, it's really very helpful. So stress is necessary to help us complete tasks. It makes us sharper and more focused at times as long as we don't go over that cusp of becoming decompensated. So we really have to think about, how am I looking at the situation that I'm dealing with and that's ahead of me. So we have to have some stress. If we had no stress, we'd be so bored we wouldn't even get out of bed in the morning. So having a job to go to, having an alarm clock that goes off, it propels us into some kind of motion, right? Any athletes in the room, anybody ever compete in any sort of way, debate, any other kind of things? My rooms have been really light on that kind of stuff. I don't know what it is. Okay, well, I'm still an athlete. I still compete. And so some of the best plays I ever made was when there were 2 outs, bases loaded. I had 2 strikes. Because what happens is you become more focused on what's happening, and then you hit the winning run in. It's things like that. So to be at our peak performance, we have to have some stress for our senses to be heightened and for us to have some kind of pressure in order to achieve. The problem is when we have too much stress and then we become burnt out. So these are my kids. I don't give out the PowerPoint because their pictures are on it. That's why you get an outline, okay? So stress it impacts the lens through which we start to view things, okay? So if you look at this picture, what do you see? You can yell it out.
Cute little babies.
Cute little boys! Oh, they're so cute, right? So when you look at this picture, you might say, look at those sweet little faces. Now, if you're stressed and that lens starts to change, you might say something like, boy, those are 2 cute little boys. That would be a great Christmas card picture, but Myron is missing a sock. And Owen isn't really smiling very big, and there's something on the floor back here, and there's something hanging on that door, and what is this thing that I didn't put away? This would be a great picture, but, and that's what we start to do. We start to disqualify things, and we start to see things through a different lens. Instead of focusing on, look at these happy, healthy little boys next to a warm fireplace, what a cozy picture. Does this make sense? We start to filter information differently. We start to interpret things. We start to interpret messages that we think are behind messages. Oh, I know what they meant by that, right? We start to predict what people are going to say to us or how something's going to go. We start to label things. This is stupid. This is dumb. They don't know what they're talking about. That person's an idiot. And we start to judge things. And what ends up happening is that starts to perpetuate us further into a cycle of not communicating clearly with others, which only increases our stress, and then we lose the messages of things in the translation that we are providing for ourselves. This impacts us at work, right? So the way this plays out, you'll know you're stressed because you'll start to do these things. And these things absolutely unravel relationships. John Gottman is one of the foremost authorities on marriage counseling in the world. He has a love lab out in Seattle where he can look at couples for about 90 seconds and with about 98% accuracy tell if they're on the road to divorce if they don't make changes in the way they communicate. These patterns of communication that unravel relationships are not just about marriage. They are about friendships, they are about co-workers, it is about everyone we come in contact with. So when we are more stressed, we start to communicate in these ways. And you'll know it because you'll hear that you might do some of these things. We all do them at some point. So criticism. So criticism and complaint are different things. Criticism are things like, you never empty the dishwasher. You're always late to meetings. And it's more character driven. It makes it about the person. You can't rely on them. A complaint is something like, I thought we agreed to meet at 8:30 this morning to go over this project and you were going to have your portion done. I was prepared for the meeting, you weren't here on time. What do we need to do to be able to go over this information? So being able to work on a repair of the relationship, talking about the behavior and what the expectation was rather than the person and making it about their character. Contempt. Contempt is also known as disgust. This is the and the eye roll, the crossing of the arms. Disgust is really hard to come back from. This is when we're so aggravated with people, we can't stand to listen to them breathe. Why you gotta breathe so loud? You're gonna leave oxygen in the room for somebody else? Why do you have to chew so loud? Everything they do gets under your skin and annoys you. Once you've gotten into a place of disgust, it's really hard to come back from that. Sarcasm. I'm going to separate sarcasm and humor for you. I have tons of friends who are like, I'm sarcastic all the time and you love me. No, that's humor. If both people are laughing and both people are having fun, then it's a joke. Sarcasm is mean-spirited and usually attacks a person's character. Sarcasm is not okay. So when we make snarky, sarcastic comments, if everyone's not laughing and having fun with it, particularly the person you're doing it towards, then it's not an okay thing to do. And it absolutely undermines trust in relationships. And then there's stonewalling, which is the silent treatment. This is avoiding people. I'm just not going to respond to that person. And what's interesting is when people stonewall, they move away and the other person chases. And then they move away and the other person chases. It's very passive aggressive. And so the person who's chasing finally gets frustrated and they lash out. And the person says, well, look at what a victim I am. I didn't do anything. But they created that aggressive response in the other person by not communicating at all and withholding communication, which is not okay. So passive-aggressive behavior actually begets aggressive behavior on another person's part, and then we sometimes blame them for it. What impact does stress have? So Kelly McGonigal talks about being able to look at stress differently as preparing for battle, but we also have to be realistic that too much stress does have a negative impact on us. So mentally, we may not be as clear thinking if we have too much stress. We become lost in our own thoughts, we make mistakes about things. One of the most stressful times in my life, and I'm a pretty organized person, I have a lot of energy, I walked away from the grocery store and left my wallet in the shopping cart. I was on my phone talking to someone about something, and I get home and I go, oh no, I had left my wallet. We all do those kind of things. Ever drive to work and go, were all the lights green? I hope they were, right? Because we get lost in our own thoughts and we get distracted with those worrying thoughts going around our heads. I mean, you don't have to admit it. I guess everybody's kind of like, don't look at me because I might have done that this morning. We make mistakes on projects that we don't typically make. You know, we're the go-to person, we're counted on, and then we make kind of what we might consider a silly error about something. Physically, we may be more tired, or it may negatively impact our ability to go to sleep. For some people, they want to sleep more. Some people can't sleep at all. It does impact cholesterol. It does impact blood pressure and heart rate. One of the things that happens in the brain when we're stressed is it starts to release hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, and those are meant to help prepare us to be able to protect ourselves. But when the brain is bathed in those constantly, it can cause problems for us. It absolutely impacts our physiological arousal. And then emotionally, we may respond to things in too big of a way. So something happens and we have an unusual response to a usual stimuli. We may be more angry, or we may go the other way and become withdrawn and numbed out. And so now we're not connecting with people or situations, and we're not enjoying things as much as we used to. It can feel like this when we have chronic stress. There are two types of stress, acute and chronic. Acute are things that happen kind of on a one-time thing. Neither one is worse than the other, right? If we think about something like a school shooting, we hope that's an acute episode in an area, right? But that has a massive impact. Just because it wasn't ongoing over a long amount of time doesn't mean that it's not as impactful as something that we experience chronically. A lot of chronic stress for people are things like family issues, financial issues, a difficult work environment, or it could be something that you're dealing with a physical illness or you're an ongoing caregiver for someone. But it can feel like this, right? That our stripes are falling off. It's like I'm falling apart. So we're going to work on that. So the other thing that stress does when our brains are being bathed in adrenaline and cortisol is this. They brought me an easel today. I usually have to do charades, so sorry you'll miss out on the charades today, but welcome that you have, and you're welcome you have an easel. So I teach this to kids and to families and to adults, and it's really helpful because sometimes we get really upset with ourselves over how we're interpreting information. So stress miscues us to the stressors that are present. So let's pretend that I like to run at Blackwater Creek, which I do, and so here I am. Ooh, I don't know if these markers are going to be very good. So here I am getting ready to go to Blackwater Creek for my run, and I've had, a pretty stressful day, but now I'm at Blackwater Creek. How do you think I feel?
Great.
Great. So give me an emotion that would be great.
Well, if you're running and you enjoy running, then you're going to be happy.
Happy. There you go. Great. Happy. So I feel happy. Thank you. So I feel happy, and here I go along the trail when all of a sudden I see a snake. Now how do I feel?
You're scared.
Scared. I'm scared. Here's my scared face. Ah! What's about to happen, right? So when you're scared, your parasympathetic nervous system comes online. That adrenaline and cortisol starts to get going in your brain, and we have one of three responses as human beings because we're primary animals, right? So what happens? Does anyone know any of the three responses? You've got it. There you go. Be confident. You've got it. Fight, flight, and the most primal response we have is we freeze. So we freeze, typically. We freeze and we go, oh crap, I wasn't expecting that, right? And then we have to make a decision. Are we going to run away to get out of there, or are we going to fight? Okay? So I'm going to run away. Whew, that's over. What feeling is that? Relieved. I love adults. You guys know good emotion words. Okay, I'm relieved. So I'm more likely the next time I see a snake to run away from it because I got some relief from that situation, right? So now let's pretend it's the next day. Okay, and here I am, and I'm back at Blackwater Creek, and usually I love to go for a run. It's my favorite thing to do at the end of the day. But yesterday I saw a snake. So how do I feel today?
A little apprehensive.
I love adults. They say words like apprehensive. Apprehensive. I feel apprehensive. So now I'm running along today and I see a stick. But what do I think? It's a snake. Why?
Because that was already triggered from yesterday.
Because yesterday I saw a snake, so now I have an expectation that it's a snake. Right, it's a similar color. So, in a typically developed brain, when I freeze in a stressful situation, I can process information. And I can go, oh wait, that's not moving. It's similar, but it's not the same color. Oh, silly me, that's a stick and not a snake. That gets harder and harder and harder the more snakes you have in your life. Does that make sense? We start to over-interpret sticks as snakes. And that's what stress does to us. We forget that not everybody's out to get us. Not every situation is a negative situation. The other thing that happens, I might have this later in the slideshow, but I'm going to say it now. The other thing that happens when we're stressed and our brains are releasing adrenaline and cortisol, which are necessary and we need, we also start to release another hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is something that propels us into relationships with others and is maximized upon when we do acts of service for other people. So the other part of the research Kelly McGonigal talks about is when you're stressed, one of the key ways to help yourself is to reach out to others in kindness. Wow, that's pretty cool, huh? And we'll get to that at the end. Questions to ask yourself when you're stressed. And these are things to do to help yourself decide, is this a stick or a snake? We have to be really objective and real about this. So we can ask ourselves, why am I actually stressed about this? What is this bringing up for me? We have to think about our own vulnerability. Another great TED Talk, if you've never watched it, is Brene Brown. Does anybody know Brene Brown? I always have at least one. She's amazing. If you don't know her work, get to know it. It will fundamentally change your life. BRENE, BROWN. She has 3 TED Talks. One on vulnerability, one on shame and guilt, and one on it's not your critics who count. They will fundamentally change your life. She's amazing. But she talks about vulnerability. And she talks about we can't be in connection with other people if we can't be vulnerable. What ends up happening with stress, though, is it starts to bring up that ticker tape of things that we think about ourselves or messages that have been given to us about others, sometimes from childhood, sometimes from other places. And so when we get stressed, we have to think about, what is this really bringing up for me? What is the thought that I'm having about myself that I'm having difficulty with? We also then want to think about, what are the solutions? What are things that I can do to actually impact the situation? Because a lot of times we want to have control over things that are not really within our control. So we have to think about what's in my control, what's not in my control, what can I do about the matters that are in my control, and what am I willing to do about that? We also want to think about, do I really need to be this upset about this? Is this a wise way to spend my energy? And it might not be. And we have to think, is this serving me and is it helpful to be this stressed out about this? What can we do? It feels kind of hopeless, right? Sometimes. What we have to realize is that thoughts are automatic. A lot of times people think emotions are automatic. They'll say, well, I'm angry and I can't help it. Well, of course I'm sad about that. We actually get to choose our emotions. Thoughts are automatic. They're like waves in the ocean. We have so many every day, we can't even be cognizant of them all. They just keep coming. Emotions, however, are attached to the thoughts that we hold on to. And we can choose to feel how we're feeling about something. So this is another illustration to help you. I'll clean this up at the end. This is called a cognitive triangle. Thoughts, feelings, and then actions. Okay? And so whatever the thought is, that's automatic. And then that leads to a feeling, and that leads to a behavior. So for example, if there's a situation of I overslept and now I'm going to be late for work, my alarm clock didn't go off, I set my alarm, it didn't go off, or I thought I hit the snooze but I turned the whole thing off, and now I'm going to be late for work, my thought might be, oh crap, now my day is ruined. My feeling might be mad at myself, angry with myself, and anxious, and then my behavior is I speed to work and I get a ticket, right? Now, if we think about it differently, we can't change the situation, right? We can't go back in time and make the alarm clock go. But we might still wake up, we're late, we're going to be late for work. And instead of thinking, oh crap, now my whole day is ruined, we might think, well, I'm glad I woke up this morning. And maybe I needed that little extra bit of sleep. And you know what? Yep, I'm going to be late, but I can have an okay day anyway. And then I might feel more hopeful about the day. And then my behavior, I'm still going to be late, but I'm not going to speed, I'm not going to get a ticket or put myself or anyone else in danger. Does that make sense? So we can't change the situation, but we can change the way we think about it. Our thoughts are pretty powerful. The other thing we can do is we can educate ourselves on types of thought traps that people fall into and identify what thought trap do I fall into most often. And we're going to talk about that as we go through the next slides. What's interesting is when I do this with adults, sometimes I'll have people come up to me and say, something's really wrong with me because I do all of these. No, that just makes you human. And you're not a robot or an alien. That's the way it works, okay? But some of these we are more comfortable with ourselves than others because we have habits. So if you can identify your cognitive distortion, you'll know how to combat it more effectively. So one cognitive distortion, type of cognitive distortion, is black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking. So this is very rigid. It's either right or it's wrong. You are either perfect at it or why even bother? You either succeed or you fail. And there are very few things in life that truly are black and white. Most of life exists in the gray. But if you describe yourself as a type A, perfectionist, OCD, my refrigerator is the most organized, all my laundry's always done, those kind of things, you might have a little bit of this. of this need for perfectionism, black and white thinking, all or nothing. The next one is mental filter. This one is only accepting part of the information. So when we have a mental filter, it's that there's a situation and we only are giving our intention, attention, and energy to part of the information that's been presented. And usually we're holding on to the more negative aspect of that. So if you think about your thoughts or a situation, you can think about it like a solution of sand and water, and you pour it through a sieve, and the sand is what's held, and the water goes through, and then you just present the sand as the evidence of the solution, but really there was more to it than that. It's the same kind of thing with our thoughts. We can jump to conclusions. We can assume what the other person's going to say, right? We can mind read. I know what they're going to say about this. Well, yeah, I could do this, but they're just going to do that or say this to us instead, or we've done this before and this is how they responded. We don't give people enough credit, right? And we just assume how things are going to go, and we start to predict things. And usually that doesn't go well. We do emotional reasoning. Because I'm angry, what they said must have been offensive, right? Because of what happened, I ought to feel sad. We start to put these expectations on the feeling part of it and then reason out the situation matches the emotion when really it may not. Labeling. I'm surrounded by idiots, right? We do this a lot. People name call way more than you realize they do if you really start to listen to it. I really pay attention to people's language and I go, ooh, what does that mean? Why is that what they chose, that they're describing this other person this way? And when we really look at definitions of things, the label doesn't typically match. We overgeneralize. So because something has happened once, it's sort of like my whole life is ruined. No one likes me. This is always what happens. Or when you find yourself saying always or never, that's usually when you're overgeneralizing. And there are very few things that always and never really match. We disqualify the positive. So this is a great example because we're at performance review evaluation time, right? Where you might get a really great evaluation where they tell you all of these wonderful things you're doing, and then your supervisor might highlight this one little area for improvement, and you perseverate on it. And it's all you can think about is this one little area for improvement, and you're forgetting all the really good things that came out of your evaluation. We're wired for the negative. We catastrophize. So this is Chicken Little, the sky is falling. So I'm going to give you an example of this one. So my ex-husband was a Chicken Little. This is not mean-spirited, by the way. He knows he's in the presentation. We were going to the beach one year, and we were driving, and there's a well-known speed trap in North Carolina on the way to the Outer Banks. You see cars pulled over there all the time if you've ever been to the Outer Banks. It goes from like 50 to 30, and if you miss the sign, you're in trouble. Well, he missed the sign. We get pulled over. He gets a ticket. Not a big deal. He did not get a reckless driving ticket. Everybody was safe. It was just a mistake. He groused and complained about that daggone ticket the entire vacation. We were there with like 7 other couples of friends. All of our kids were playing together. And I'm thinking, man, get a grip. Let it go. Put your toes in the sand and have a Corona. We are at the beach, right? But we can do this to ourselves, where we start to catastrophize and Chicken Little things and say everything's ruined. We take something that's very small and we turn it into something that's huge. You know who makes mistakes? Everybody makes mistakes. I love it when I ask kids because they go, you do. Yeah, I do. We all do, because they think that's the answer. You, Miss Bailey. No, we all make mistakes. And we don't have to take something small and turn it into a full-scale Armageddon because there's a mistake. Shoulds, oughts, and musts. These are the insane expectations we put on ourselves. And women, we are the worst. We get into these mommy wars and, well, looking at what this person is doing, and I should be able to handle all these things because look at everything she has on her plate. The worst is when your kids go to school. I don't know anyone who has raised children, but there's all this competition about which mom's doing which thing and all this stuff. I'm going to tell you a secret. When my kids have a bake sale, I go to Fresh Market, I buy cookies, I put them on a plate, I saran wrap them and send them in. I have participated and no one cares they weren't homemade. There are other moms coming in talking about how they've been up all night with flour in their hair. I don't have time. I'm sorry, good for you. I do not have time. And I'm not in a competition with you. I have participated and loved my child. That's it. Shoulds, oughts, and musts. Insane expectations that we have for ourselves. And a lot of this is usually related to baggage that we have that we're carrying around too. And we got to unpack it. Why do I have these expectations of myself? Are these expectations real? Are these expectations really that someone else has for me, or am I doing this to myself? Personalization. This is a way, blame is a way we discharge anger. So we might blame other people. You're the reason this task failed. You're the reason that this project did not go well. Or we might over-personalize it to ourselves, and then we're apologizing for things that really that weren't our fault. Sometimes we can do that because we're trying to appease everyone. Well, that's not real, and that's not honest, and it's disingenuous. So we can talk about things factually. We don't have to be emotionally wrapped up in it if someone has done something, but we also don't have to go to this place of blame. So what do we do with thought traps? We call it stinking thinking, and so we're going to learn how to combat this. So the first thing you want to be able to do is to identify what the distortion is that you're having. So what thought trap am I really falling into? What is happening in my own brain that's putting me in this? We want to examine the evidence. And not just some of the evidence, all of the evidence. Remember, we don't want a mental filter. We really want to, if we can, step back and objectively look at things like we're looking at it through a video camera, taking the emotional piece out so that we can look at things more objectively. We also can use the double standard method. Turns out we're nicer to other people than we are to ourselves. Does that surprise anybody else here? No, not really. So pretend that you're dealing with a friend who might be dealing with the same kind of stressful situation, and what might you say to that friend and say that to yourself? That's a really good strategy to use. We can do a cost and benefit analysis. This is kind of like a pros cons about when you're trying to make decisions during stressful times. But most people, when they do pros and cons, they just list things out. This one is more about weighting how important that thing is to you. So looking at what are my values and how important is this part. Because you might only have one con on your list and 5 pros, but that con might outweigh every pro that is in that other part of the list. We also can work to develop our thinking in shades of gray and not getting so rigid on things. You know, there's not a lot of discourse anymore. There's a lot of, because people's emotions are really heightened about social issues, political issues. I'm right, you're wrong, shut up. Right? That's not appropriate or fair to anyone. And so if we can get back to a place where we have discourse and we're able to interact with one another in a healthier way, we can find these shades of gray more effectively. We can also use the survey method. The survey method is where you talk to other people. Here's the catch. You can't just talk to people that you know are going to agree with you and validate your point of view. You know, around the water cooler, did you hear what so-and-so said? And yeah, they're such a jerk, and I know, and you didn't deserve any of that. And, you know, we can't do that. So if you don't have a really good friend who will call you on your crap, work to find one of those. My best friend is this way. I will call her and say, I know I'm being completely irrational to be angry over this and to be offended by this, but I just need you to choose me and link arms with me and be angry with me and just stand firm in this righteous indignation. And I know I'm being ridiculous. And she'll say, you know what? You are being ridiculous, but I love you and I will stand right here with you until you make the choice you know you need to make and do something different. We all need people like that in our lives. And sometimes we push those people away because we don't want to look back at the mirror of ourselves about what we're doing. And then we can also use reattribution, solutions rather than blame. So when things fall apart or there's something stressful, particularly at work or even at home, rather than trying to figure out whose fault it was, instead go to a place of what do we need to do about this? What can we do about this? Because I guarantee you the person who made the mistake that got the train all off the rails already feels bad enough, right? So let's move together in order to be able to take control back and to make wise decisions. The other thing that we can do in times of stress is to get really specific about what our goals are, because that gives us something with some teeth to propel us into motion instead of feeling as though we are drowning at sea, okay? It will help us to move forward. So goals should be performance-based and not outcome-based, okay? So just because you don't meet what your goal is doesn't mean you haven't improved or made any progress. So at the beginning of the year, I work out at the Jamerson YMCA. At the beginning of January, what happens? You can't find room in a class. You can't get on a piece of equipment because people have New Year's resolutions to get healthy, right? Come January 15th, we're about back where we used to be. But it doesn't mean those people who didn't come back aren't making an effort to get healthy. So maybe they said, I'm going to work out every day, but maybe they start coming just once a month. That's still progress towards where they're wanting to be. Side note about kids and being performance and not outcome based is we're working on this with children. I think now we're having more awareness, but if you have children in your life, one of the best gifts you can give them is to validate that. You tried really hard. You stuck with that until you got it. Good for you. Because the word that gets thrown around in schools and in families that I hear that gives me the heebie-jeebies is smart. You are so smart. What does that mean? No. And kids are black and white thinkers. So if they think they're smart and then they struggle with a task, they either give up on the task or they say, I must not be smart. And that's not true. So what we want to validate is grit. You stuck with it. And we want to do that for adults too. You stuck with it till you got it. You kept problem solving even though it was hard. You didn't give up. You asked for help. It's the same thing with our own goals, but especially for kids. You want to have some kind of emotional attachment to your goals. If you don't feel it in your soul, you're going to push it to the side and it's going to become a back burner issue. Your goal should make you tear up a little. You have got to find what is it that is so important to me that this is actually driving me to make it a goal. When I worked at the Healthy Families Clinic for people who were trying to get to a healthier weight, I heard a lot of people talk about time with my grandchildren. I heard a lot of people say, I want to walk my daughter down the aisle. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that. And they would tear up. It was so important to them. That's what you have to do with your own goals about things. We also have to start big with our goals and then work our way back to start with the smallest components. Anybody ever make a to-do list and then mark off something, put something on it so you could mark it off that you already did?
Oh, yeah.
It's such a wise thing to do. Do you know why? Because what it does is it releases serotonin in your brain. And you're like, I got this. It combats procrastination. So if you don't do that already, there's a tip for you. Go ahead and put something you've already done and mark it off, even if it's had my cup of coffee. Best part of the day for me. Not quite so nice without it, right? Do you know how you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And you don't start with the biggest, nastiest piece because then you'll never want to eat elephant again. You start with the smallest, most delicious morsel, so you go, I want more of that. And that is what you should be doing with your goals. Makes sense, right? And you have to write them down. If you don't write them down, they're wishes. And wishes, they go out with birthday candles. Okay? So if you're not really committed to it unless you write it down. Once you become really committed to your goals and you write them down, magical things start to happen because you become more focused on what it is you want. To write a goal, it should be specific, exactly what you're trying to accomplish, somehow measurable. So if it's something like the gym, I'm going 3 days a week, you can measure that. You know if you went 3 days or not, right? Attainable. So don't set the bar so high. Don't set it all the way to the end. Set goals in increments so that you can meet it and then keep going. That's that serotonin piece that keeps us going. They have to be relevant to what you're trying to accomplish and time-bound. You want to have an end date. But end dates are kind of fluid. So if you come up against your end date and you haven't met your goal, what do? You extend it. You say, okay, I'm going to give you more time. I'm going to give you more time to be able to do this. The other thing that we need to be careful of as we're going towards goal setting and managing stress is thinking about our perception of events and really what we're working towards in our life. Okay, so this parable is one of my favorites. It's not mine. It's from ancient folklore. But what can happen is we start to work towards things and then we get to a negative place. Okay, so this is a tale of two travelers. So there was a hiker on top of a mountain staying in a village, and he starts to come down a mountain to go to the village in the valley. And he comes across a farmer, and he says, excuse me, kind farmer, can you tell me what the village is like down in the valley? And the farmer says, sure. Where are you coming from? He said, well, I'm coming from the village at the top of the mountain. And he says, okay, well, tell me what it was like there. And the hiker says, well, it was awful. It was cold and rainy, and I didn't speak the language, so I didn't understand anything that anybody was saying. And I had to sleep on a dirt floor, and so I didn't sleep well at all. And they gave me some kind of stew. It had yak in it. It was disgusting. I mean, it was one of the worst experiences of my life. And the farmer looks at him and says, well, I think you'll find the village in the valley very much the same way. And the hiker thanks him and continues on. The second hiker starts to come down from the same village down to the same village in the valley, comes across the same farmer. And he says, excuse me, kind farmer, can you tell me what the village in the valley is like? And the farmer says, yes, of course I can, but first tell me where you're coming from. And the hiker says, well, I'm coming from the village at the top of the mountain. He said, well, what was it like there? And the hiker says, it was awesome. It was cold and rainy, which was really invigorating and made me feel alive. And I slept in the dirt huts that they had, and the people were so kind and hospitable to let me do that. They opened their homes to me and took me right in. And I didn't understand the language they were speaking, but it was so melodic and really cool to listen to them talk to one another. And they gave me a stew. I think it had yak in it. I didn't really care for it, but it was so cool to live like the indigenous people did. And they were so kind to me. It was the best experience of my life. And the farmer said, well, then I think you'll find the village in the valley very much the same way. For all practical purposes, they had the same experience. The difference was their perception. And maybe their expectation and their goals for what that experience were going to be. The other thing that we can do to help with our perception, to help slow us down so we can see things more clearly, because when we're stressed and adrenaline and cortisol bring our parasympathetic nervous system online, and we may not realize if we're living in chronic stress that we're staying at a physiologically aroused level. Our bodies become so used to that, we may not even realize how stressed we are until we start to re-regulate ourselves and bring it down. Moni is doing a series of full mindfulness training. So these very, very nicely dovetail together. So if you're at this one, please go to Moni's mindfulness one too to get more training on mindfulness. But I'm going to take you through one, maybe two of these activities just to give you an idea of how they work. When your parasympathetic nervous system comes online, the oxygen-rich blood that usually goes to our brains and helps us think more clearly and to make good decisions goes other places like our arms and legs. And we don't think as clearly, we make mistakes, we respond in ways that we wouldn't typically respond. So we have to slow down to think more clearly. So the first one that I'm going to do with you is called controlled diaphragmatic deep breathing. That's a really fancy word for saying I'm going to teach you how to take deep breaths, but I'm going to teach you how to do it in a way that brings down your physiological arousal after only 3 breaths. Okay? So I'm going to have everybody uncross your legs, put your feet down, sit back to back and bottom to bottom in your chair, roll your shoulders up to your ears and down your back like you're putting your scapula in your back pockets, shoulders away from your ears, like there's a string pulling your head to the ceiling. And if you feel comfortable, I don't ever know anyone's story, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. If you don't feel comfortable, you can peek, and you can peek as much as you want. So if that means your eyes are open the whole time, it's totally fine. I'm going to talk you through it first, and then we'll practice. You're going to breathe in through your nose, and you're going to breathe in so deeply that that oxygen-rich blood goes down past your diaphragm, which is why it's called diaphragmatic deep breathing, down into your stomach. We're not going to breathe shallow into our lungs. And then we're going to breathe out through our mouths more slowly than what we took the air in, slow and controlled. So you can put your hands on your stomach so you can feel the air go all the way down. It's going to be like your stomach is expanding into a balloon. So deep breath in through your nose, expanding your stomach, out through your mouth slowly. Deep breath in and out. One more, deep breath in and out. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Can you feel it settling you just even after 3? It should. And if you're not able to breathe deeply enough to get it past your diaphragm, that takes practice. You know, as women, particularly as Southern women, we're kind of always told, suck it in, hold it in, you know, put your pants on, you know, those kind of things. And so we come from a culture that doesn't allow you to just let your belly be soft, which makes it harder to breathe. As infants, has anybody ever seen a baby breathe? What moves? Their stomach. We're born belly breathers. And somehow we culturally train ourselves out of that, okay? So going back to being belly breathers is really very helpful. I will also take you through progressive muscle relaxation in just a second. The hands, feet, back seat breath is about sitting in your chair and just bringing awareness. So just getting still where you are, your hands on the tops of your legs, and just letting each part of your body just be still and just notice what it's like to be still. We also tend to fidget a lot because we're used to doing that. We're used to being in constant motion. It's hard for me to sit. You know, these guys said, we're going to tape you. Where do you stand? I said, I don't stand. I walk. It's part of what I do. I also work with children, so I'm trained to move around a lot. But it's just about being still and just noticing the breath. Not controlling the breath, just noticing it. We can do meditation. Meditation is hard for most people. If you can do 10 minutes, you've been real successful. Pema Chodron, who has been doing meditation her whole life, people say, what's it like to be an expert? She said, I don't know what that means. Because she's still learning. What happens with meditation a lot of times is we get real still and then thoughts start to flood us that seem to be intrusive to us. Some people too have this idea that meditation is about not having thoughts. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's just about noticing them and just noticing that they're there and not grabbing hold of them. A body scan, there are multiple ways you can do this. So one is you can use imagery in your mind and imagine there's, for me, it's what's suggested is blue, which I appreciate, like a warm blue light, like a copy scanner going down, feeling it melt down you and coming back up. Another way of doing body scan is being able to release pressure in each part of your body. So being able, if you can, lay down, right hand thumb, right pointer finger, and kind of take yourself through. In yoga, they call it a yoga nidra, which is like a body scan and meditation at the end of a yoga practice as well. Yoga is a moving form of meditation. So meditation can also be walking. It can be outside and noticing things, just being fully present and aware. It doesn't have to be just sitting crisscross applesauce, you know, which is people's traditional view of meditation. Meditation is actually more broad than that. And then we also have these cognitive strategies. So I will quickly take you through a progressive muscle relaxation. Again, put your feet down. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes, hands open and on the tops of your legs. Honor any pain that you have. If you have a cramp in your foot or anything like that, just let it go. No one has to be a hero here or do anything that's uncomfortable. So tighten your toes as tightly as you can. Tighter, 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 and relax. Tighten your feet as tightly as you can. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten your legs. You can either squeeze them together or squeeze the chair as tightly as you can, isometrically, all those muscles. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten your bottom as tightly as you can. This makes everybody sit up a little taller usually. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten your stomach as tightly as you can. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten both of your hands as tightly as you can, like you're squeezing lemons. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten your arms as tightly as you can, like you're holding a big heavy box. Tighter, 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 relax. Pull your shoulders to your ears like you're like you're a turtle pulling your head into the shell. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten your stomach as tightly as you can. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten your back as tightly as you can, isometrically, all those muscles. Tighter, 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 relax. Tighten your face as tightly as you can, like there's a fly buzzing around the room, and if it lands on your face, it can't stay, the more wrinkly you make it. Tighter, 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 relax. Now tighten your whole body from the tips of your toes to the top of your head as tightly as you can. Tighter, tighter, tighter. Relax. Take a deep breath in. Long sigh out. One more deep breath in. Long, heavy sigh out. Notice what it feels like just to be relaxed in your chair. When you're ready, you can start to wiggle your fingers and toes and then open your eyes. Feel good? Yeah? So this one takes practice because our bodies are full of muscles and muscles have memory. So when we're living in stress and tension, we tend to become more rigid without realizing it over time. And so we relax and go, ooh, that feels good. But pretty quickly our muscles start to go back to the homeostasis places they were living. And so they start to get up again. So it takes a lot of practice. This is a really good one if you have worrying thoughts, if your pillow becomes that magic place where you lay your head down and you remember everything you didn't do for the day, or that silly thing you said when you were 12, all that kind of stuff. When that happens, this is a good thing to do because it quiets the mind as well. Okay? A word of mindfulness and cell phones. The things that have meant to bring us together through social media actually interfere in us being engaged with one another on a regular basis. So my challenge to you would be to put your phones away. My 8-year-old, when he had his birthday party last year, every picture I took, every parent that's in the background is like this. They're not engaged. And I understand, but we also don't want to be judgmental of that person on the beach who's on their cell phone because we don't know what they might be dealing with, right? Maybe there's a financial thing going on, they're trying to sell a house, maybe they have a family member who's ill, so we don't want to be judgmental of people. But if you know for yourself this is a time you could put your devices away and you could be engaged more fully, then please do that. It gets in the way of us actually being present. So mindfulness sounds like a good idea to most people because it's giving your full attention to the present moment and being fully present and engaged. But what gets in the way? I will live in the moment unless it's unpleasant. And then I'm going to do things like have a cookie. Or I'm going to do other things that have not been healthy for me, right? So it's interesting to me, especially in Southern culture, we use this phrase a lot, this too shall pass. Does everyone know that's completely misconstrued? Because it wasn't meant for negative events. It was meant for everything. So when you say today is the happiest day of my life, this too shall pass. Today has been the best experience I have ever had. This too shall pass. Nothing is permanent. Can we lean in even when things are hard and just be grateful for the experience that we're having, that I'm alive and I get to be here? You start to live that way and watch how it opens things up for you. It's amazing. We can incorporate mindfulness into every day to help us, okay? So we absolutely need fresh air to create dopamine and serotonin. Those are the happy chemicals in our brains. So getting outside every day, even if it's just for a short amount of time, is helpful to us. You can do walking meditation. Notice the leaves. Try and stay as focused as you can using all of your 5 senses. If you find that you're a fast eater, I am. I usually eat standing up too, which is not good. If you move your fork to the opposite hand, I'm just being real. Like, I teach stress management, but I don't walk it perfectly. Let's be honest, we're all human beings. If you put your fork in your non-dominant hand, it slows you down. You notice how it feels different. Laundry, I hate it. I'm grateful my children have so many clothes, but gosh, I hate to put them away. I wish I could throw them away and just buy new ones every time. That's really silly. I've had to incorporate mindfulness to help myself be able to do that and to have more of a grateful heart. Notice how Myron's clothes feel different than Owen's clothes. The size difference, the color difference. We can do our deep breathing. We can be mindful of what's coming out of our mouth and what we're about to say. And what we can do to help us with that too is listening. Are we listening with the intent to respond to the other person? If you're already formulating what you're going to say, you're missing part of what they are saying. So being fully present to really give an ear and to fully listen before we speak. Being able to do meditation if you can. And we can incorporate other people into our mindfulness. It's much more fun when there are other people who are on the same journey as we are and can validate that experience. Another thing that we can do to help cultivate positive thinking in times of stress, and I'm not talking about being Pollyanna and is everything sunshine and rainbows and unicorns and sprinkles when we're going through difficult times, but we can find purpose and meaning even in the stressful times. Purpose and meaning even in the difficulties. So this is one way to be able to do this, is to use a gratitude journal. So you can list out things you're grateful for, big or small. This is my personal favorite part of it, what I'm learning from my challenges. So what is the challenging situation I'm facing, and what am I learning about myself through this? Or what am I learning about other people? And sometimes it's that people show up for me. It might be that I'm one tough cookie, or I've been through harder things. I know I can handle this thing, right? Sometimes it's really helpful for us to look back on all the things we've already come through to put in perspective what we're facing now. We can put people that I'm thankful for, and that doesn't have to just be people that you're in relationships that you know. It might be the person at Kroger who saw you had 3 items and they had a whole basket and they said, hey, go ahead of me, right? Sometimes that's really a good thing. And the best part of the day. So what has been the best part of my day is a good thing to think about. This is from Stephen Covey's work. He talks about habits of healthy people and habits of successful people. And he talks about 12 things that happy people do differently. They express gratitude. They say thank you. Centra is really buying into that concept with the Thanks to You program, right? Where you can send somebody a thank you, which is a really nice thing to do. I would also challenge you, though, to go tell the person thank you, to handwrite a thank you note. Those small acts of gratitude really make an impactful difference on people. To cultivate optimism, so being able to see the world as a place of possibilities. Is there more good than bad in the world? Is this something that can improve our experience? And it usually is. Avoid overthinking and social comparison. There is a high correlation to being on Facebook before you go to sleep and signs and symptoms of depression. Do you know why? Because everyone puts their highlight reel on Facebook. Fake, phony Facebook. I am one of the only people on the planet not on Facebook.
No, you're not.
Oh, good.
I'm not.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I tell people I'm not on Facebook and they look horrified. How do you communicate with anyone? I call them. And if people want to be in relationship with me, they call me back. Can't do Facebook. I can't do Facebook. It's fine if you do. There's not a judgment about that. There's some really good things about Facebook. But people put all these things on there. Like I would run into people in the grocery store back when I was on Facebook, and they would look a grumpy mess. And I thought, didn't you just get back from Cancun? I saw your photos. Why are you so grumpy? Because it's not real. They practice acts of kindness. Anybody do random acts of kindness? It will fundamentally change your life, won't it? I challenge you. Try just 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row. Just do it. It didn't have to be big. One that I did one time was my kids used to go to Elizabeth's Early Learning Center down here, and they were doing all that construction for forever down here on Rivermont. And there was this guy. It was wintertime, and he always looked freezing cold. And I go by Joe Beans every morning. I thought, I'm gonna get that guy a cup of coffee. So I did. I had to get over myself because I pulled up and realized he stands on the other side. He's gonna have to reach through my car to get this cup of coffee. And I don't like people in my space if I don't know you. But I got over myself. I pulled up, I rolled the window down, and he said, can I help you? I said, no, this is for you. And he picked up that cup of coffee and strutted back to his spot. And let me tell you what, it made his whole day to stand there with a warm cup of coffee as cold as it was. Something small. They nurture social relationships. You have got to, especially women, we have got to have a tribe of people around us that we are social with. And it can't just be the people that you work with. Because when all your friends are people that you work with, what do you talk about? Work. I have friends from work, but I have a rule. If you come to my house, we're not talking about work. And you get one warning and then you got to go. Because we're not going to do this. That's not why I invited you over. We develop strategies for coping, healthy coping strategies. We learn to forgive. That's a hard one. Ooh, forgiveness. Forgiveness is not absolvement of what someone else has done. And forgiveness is more about us. Because holding on to anger about slights or frustrations or even real insult or injury, it's like drinking poison expecting the other person to die. Forgiveness is about surrendering ourselves in order to be able to move on. They increase flow experiences. Flow is where you feel like time is standing still. Ever do an activity that you love so much that you look up and you went, how did 3 hours go by? That's a flow experience. That's what you want to have as much of as possible. They savor life's joys. We find happiness even in the small things. They also commit to your goals. Remember, we've said write them down. Practice some form of spirituality. There's something greater than all of us somewhere, whatever that is. That there's some kind of golden thread that connects everybody in some sort of way. And then taking care of your body. This is crucial. If we are going to be warriors on the front line of healthcare, we have to act as though we really are. And that means getting enough exercise, drinking plenty of water, eating healthy foods, and watching our caffeine intake. Caffeine has a 36-hour half-life, which means the coffee that you drank roughly 2 days ago is still impacting you and can impact your sleep cycles. So being cautious about caffeine. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you part of my story of how I came to teach this workshop and finding purpose and meaning in the struggle. This is my oldest son, Owen. This is an old picture because now he's 8, but I love this picture. He used to make this noise when he would do that with his head. Ah! And every time I see this picture, I can hear that noise. He was born in 2009. Does anyone remember the health crisis that was going on in 2009? Similar to this year. The flu. H1N1, swine flu. Children dying, elderly people dying, massive flu clinics, people lined up around the blocks. It was on the news every night. He was born in October of that year. So he was born into the heart of the H1N1 crisis. I was hypervigilant about it because I was worried because he was teeny tiny and didn't really have an immune system. Thanksgiving, he was 7 weeks old. We did not live here in Lynchburg at the time. We lived in another city, came home to visit for Thanksgiving. I called ahead to every family, the matriarchs of the family, and I said, if anyone's been sick, please let us know because we don't want to come because there's this huge H1N1 crisis. Please make sure people have had their flu shots. And while we love you and would like to be with you, we'll be part of this family the rest of our lives, so if we miss one holiday, no big deal. Long story short, there was part family that was not open, honest, forthcoming, and he got H1N1. We ended up in the emergency room here in Lynchburg with a fever, mottling of the skin, difficulty breathing. This is not where we lived. A nurse met me at the door of the emergency room. I didn't touch the waiting room except to walk through it. That was a grace and a mercy. I mean, he's an infant. He shouldn't have been waiting. However, we know things happen. Straight back. The nurse, one of the nurses that worked on him when they were trying to do IVs and everything, had just been through a training about how to help babies with pain and distracting them with pacifiers you dip in sugar water. I'm a trauma therapist. The only thing I could think the whole time was trauma, and what is this doing to his brain? I had my arms around him while they were doing procedures, and a nurse asked me to move. That same nurse with the sugar water, her voice sounded like a gong in my head. I know that's not how she said it, but she said, "She will not be moved." It sounded like a gong. She said, "She will stay in contact with him. You can unplug that machine and move it to the other side of the bed and do the same thing." She was my advocate. What a kind, good soul. I still send her pictures of Owen, by the way. She made a significant impact on my family. One procedure I did have to step out for, they had to do a spinal tap to check for different things. I stepped out. Oh, Dr. Frenchick, too, was our ER physician. Let me tell you what, I remember him being 8 foot tall. What is he, squarely 5'8", something like that, 5'9"? But I remember him being a giant. He didn't leave my side. He did ask me to step out for that one procedure. He said, "This is going to be too much for a mom." And I stepped out. This lady steps out from another curtain, an older lady. And she said, "Is that your baby?" I was stressed. I wanted to say, "No, that's not my baby. I found him in the dumpster. Why are you even asking me?" I didn't say that to her. I said, "Yes, that's my baby." And she said, "What's his name?" And I thought, what does it matter what his name is? And I said, "His name is Owen." And she said, "Okay." And I watched her pull back her curtain who I'm assuming was her husband was laying in a bed waiting for treatment, and their children. And they circled up and they prayed for Owen. I don't care what your faith beliefs are, that was an act of kindness. They were clearly in their own struggle, and they took time to provide kindness and care to me and to my family. This was a horrible, horrible situation. He was in ICU for 4 days. I had physicians talking about statistics and whether or not he would survive. He had residual issues that happened because of this. His immune system was eradicated. He had 3 surgeries by the time he was 3. Emotionally, he was dysregulated. He's had to have occupational therapy. But let me tell you what, he is one of the highest achieving kids in his class. He plays sports. He is the kindest, most loving big brother on the planet. Could not have gotten to where we are without the struggle that we went through. It made me a better mom. And you know what he knows about that story? Is you are the toughest kid I know, and you've got a major purpose, dude, because you're still here. He doesn't need to know that relationships were unraveled, that trust was broken. He doesn't need to know or how I, paced the hospital. What he hears is, there are so many good people in the world that show up when they need to, and you are so loved. I love it. And he's my little sweetie. So my challenge to you, when we face times of stress, and just because we faced a time of stress doesn't mean it's over. For Owen, it kind of goes on, right? This is going to be, long term for him. But no matter what, to live wholehearted. I was so grateful in every moment for everyone who showed up for us. And I would thank them. Some of the kindest people I met were nurses. Oh my gosh. And some of the most overworked people on the planet, in my opinion. My mother was one, I know. Kindness. And in a way that was unexpected and undeserved. Didn't have to be. To be a warrior, to see ourselves as rising to a challenge. I'm getting ready to go into battle to be successful, not I'm falling apart. To rise to the challenges that are before us, and to continue to be a force for good in the world. So thank you guys so much for coming. And if you have questions, then I'll stick around and you can ask me what your questions are, particularly if they're about resources too. I'll be happy to share. So thank you so much for coming.